Jungkook broke down crying to doctors about Jimin's sudden collapse. What he revealed left the entire hospital in stunned silence. The sound of a chair crashing echoed through the hallway, followed by Jungkook's trembling voice screaming, "Please, someone help him. He's not breathing right." The emergency room lights glared white, sterile, merciless. Jimin's body was limp in Jungkook's arms, his skin far too pale, lips tinted with a bluish hue. Jungkook's hands trembled, soaked with cold sweat and the residual fear of watching someone he loved collapse in front of him without warning. Nurses rushed in, the flatline beep of the monitor like a cruel joke against the silence that consumed the room. Doctors barked rapid instructions, but everything blurred in Jungkook's vision except Jimin's motionless body. His knees hit the floor as they took Jimin from his arms. He didn't care that he was shaking, sobbing, unable to breathe properly himself. He only cared that Jimin hadn't opened his eyes. "I should have seen it earlier, I should have stopped him," Jungkook cried out to no one and everyone as a nurse tried to coax him into a chair. "He said he was tired, but I didn't think he meant." His voice cracked into fragments as he pressed the heels of his palms into his eyes, trying to hold in a scream. Inside the ER, doctors initiated a code blue. IVs were inserted, monitors blared, oxygen was administered. His condition was unstable, oxygen levels dropping. They had to intubate, still no response. "Jimin SSI has a critically irregular heartbeat," the senior doctor told the team, unaware that Jungkook could hear everything from the hallway, his body pressed against the cold wall, his heart thudding painfully. "We need to check his neuro levels, possibility of an underlying autoimmune flare. Who's his primary?" Jungkook's knuckles turned white around his phone. The last text Jimin had sent him glowed on the screen. "Don't worry about me, just keep singing." That was 12 minutes before he collapsed backstage. In that moment, Jungkook's world collapsed. This wasn't just exhaustion. This was something deeper, darker, something Jimin had hidden from them all. He pushed through the double doors without waiting for permission. "Please," he begged the doctors, his voice broken and almost childlike, "you have to save him, I don't care what it takes, just save him." The room went still. A young nurse placed a gentle hand on Jungkook's shoulder, but he shrugged it off, stepping closer. "You don't understand. He was trying to protect us all. He didn't want us to worry. He didn't tell anyone what he was going through." Jungkook's breathing was erratic now. "But I knew, and I ignored it." The lead doctor raised a hand. "Mr. Jimin," he said cautiously, "you need to let us do our job." Jungkook collapsed into a seat as if the weight of his own guilt had finally crushed his spine. He buried his face in his hands. "Please," he whispered again, but this time more to himself. "Please don't let me be too late." Meanwhile, inside the trauma bay, the medical team fought to stabilize Jimin's condition. But every effort only yielded more questions. His body wasn't responding like they expected. Lab results didn't align. Something was wrong, terribly wrong, but they couldn't pinpoint it. Outside, Jungkook replayed every conversation, every moment where Jimin had smiled too brightly, laughed too hard, or deflected every concern with "I'm fine." Now he realized how hollow those reassurances had been. And he hated himself for believing them. Jin arrived first, followed by Namjoon and Taehyung, their faces pale and disoriented, as if the universe had suddenly betrayed them. No one said anything. What could they say? Jimin was the heart of their unit, the bridge between the loud and the quiet, the laughter in their darkest days. "How bad is it?" Namjoon finally asked, his voice hoarse. Jungkook couldn't look at them, he just shook his head. Silence engulfed the waiting room. The kind of silence that didn't demand answers, only prayers. Taehyung stared at the swinging ER doors, jaw clenched so tightly that his face twitched. "He didn't want us to know," he said, almost to himself. "That idiot, always protecting us, even from the truth." Jin leaned forward, fingers interlaced. "This isn't happening," he muttered. "This cannot be happening." Hours passed. Jungkook hadn't moved from the chair, his fingers still clasped in a silent plea. His mind kept drifting back to the night before, the way Jimin had lingered backstage, the hesitation in his step, the way he clutched his side before quickly straightening his posture when someone looked his way. A sudden buzz of activity snapped everyone to attention. The doors opened and a nurse stepped out, face unreadable. She looked around and then met Jungkook's eyes. "He's stable," she said, her voice carefully controlled, "but unconscious. We've transferred him to ICU for observation." Jungkook stood on shaky legs. "Can I see him?" "Only for a few minutes." He entered the ICU with footsteps that barely touched the ground. Machines beeped softly around the room and the scent of antiseptic hung heavy in the air. Jimin lay there, face serene but unfamiliar in stillness. Tubes, wires, a ventilator. Jungkook walked to his side, his hand trembling as he reached for Jimin's. He brushed his knuckles gently over Jimin's fingers, then brought his lips close to his ear. "I'm sorry," he whispered, voice cracked raw. "You didn't deserve this. You always carried our pain, but none of us ever asked how heavy yours was." He sat beside him, fingers wrapped tightly around Jimin's hand. The others stood quietly at the doorway, watching their youngest crumble in silence. Later, doctors would ask Jungkook questions about stress levels, recent symptoms, any strange behaviors. He answered mechanically, but none of it felt real. All that mattered was whether Jimin would wake up. And if he did, what would he say? Because secrets were now surfacing, and the truth behind Jimin's condition was only beginning to unravel. And Jungkook knew what he had confessed to the doctors was only the beginning. The soft beep of machines echoed in the cold room like the ticking of a bomb waiting to go off. Jungkook hadn't moved in hours. His eyes were locked on Jimin's face, memorizing every pale detail as if imprinting it into his bones in case. No, he refused to finish that thought. ICU lights buzzed overhead. The air was too clean, too sterile, too quiet. The nurses had come and gone, shifting the IV, adjusting the monitors, checking vitals. But Jungkook didn't budge. Every touch to Jimin's body felt like a theft. Every moment that passed without Jimin's eyes opening chipped away at something vital in Jungkook's soul. He tightened his grip on Jimin's fingers. "I told them," he whispered, his voice frayed like the edge of a ripped banner. "I told the doctors everything. I told them about the blood tests you skipped, the nights you said you were fine when you clearly were, the way your hands trembled backstage, the way you always brushed it off as fatigue when you looked like you hadn't slept in days." The door creaked, and Jungkook didn't look up until he heard the voice that made his jaw clench. "You told them." Taehyung stood near the door, arms crossed, a shadow stretched across his face. "All of it." Jungkook didn't answer, not immediately. Taehyung stepped closer. "You had no right to tell them everything without us agreeing on it." Jungkook's voice cracked as he turned, eyes red and jaw set tight. "No right," he echoed, standing now, breathing hard. "He could have died. Do you get that? And you're worried about whether I got your permission." "He trusted us," Taehyung shot back, his voice low but sharp. "Trusted us to keep it between us. You had no right to expose everything, not like that." Jungkook closed the distance between them in a blink. "You think this is about trust?" His voice rose, trembling with suppressed rage. "He was lying to us, T, every single day, and we let him. We played along like idiots, thinking we were protecting him when all we were doing was watching him fall apart." Namjoon entered just in time to see Jungkook shove a hand through his hair, backing away before he did something worse. Jin followed close behind, his face tight with worry. Taehyung's jaw worked as if he wanted to say more, but Namjoon held a hand up. "Stop, both of you. This isn't the time." Jin moved toward the bed, adjusting the blanket draped over Jimin's chest. His hand lingered on Jimin's wrist a second longer than necessary. "His oxygen's better," he murmured. "Doctor said there was a moment during the night, when his heart tried to correct itself." "That's a good sign," Namjoon said, voice low, hopeful. But Jungkook wasn't ready to move on. You think he'd still be alive right now if I hadn't told them about the painkillers he was hiding in his bag? His voice cracked. Do you think they would have known how to treat him if I hadn't mentioned the blackouts, the coughing up blood last month? Silence fell again. Taehyung looked away, jaw clenched, fists curled. He asked me not to say anything, he muttered, begged me. And you thought protecting his secret was more important than protecting him, Jungkook shot back. You don't get it, Taehyung turned around, finally losing his composure. You don't know what it's like to see someone breaking in front of you and feel powerless. You weren't the one holding his hair back while he threw up blood in Tokyo. You weren't the one pulling him off the floor after his legs gave out in the dressing room last week. I didn't say anything because I thought if I gave him space, he'd come to me, because that's how Jimin works. He comes to you when he's ready. And now. He stopped, chest heaving. And now he's unconscious, Jungkook said, his voice quieter but cutting like glass. And we're all just standing here arguing about who failed him the least. Namjoon rubbed his face. We all failed him. Jin finally spoke, quietly but firmly. Maybe that's not the point anymore. Maybe the point now is what we do when he wakes up. No one said a word. The weight of the if suffocated every attempt to breathe. That night Jungkook refused to leave the hospital, not even when management called, not even when his own schedule was burning. He barely ate, barely spoke. He spent every hour at Jimin's bedside recounting stories in a quiet voice, some funny, some filled with regret. You remember Busan, he whispered once, tracing the edge of Jimin's bandaged wrist. You said you wanted to disappear for a week and be no one. We dyed your hair, wore masks, and walked the pier like we were strangers. I should have known then. You were already trying to vanish. The next morning, a doctor pulled Jungkook aside. He was tall, graying, with intelligent eyes that had clearly seen too much. Mr. Jian, he said gently, there's something we need to talk about. Jungkook's stomach turned. What? We found something in the blood panels, something that wasn't caused by stress or overwork. Jungkook braced himself. We believe Jimin has been suffering from a rare autoimmune vascular inflammation. It's aggressive. It's unpredictable. It might explain the pulmonary issues, the fatigue, the blackouts. Jungkook's vision tunneled. Is it treatable? The doctor hesitated. It depends on how long it's been untreated, on whether it's caused secondary complications. We're consulting specialists now, but he should have come in months ago. He should have come in months ago. Jungkook collapsed into a waiting room chair like he'd been shot. The truth was out now. It wasn't just stress. It wasn't just exhaustion. It was a ticking time bomb inside Jimin's body that he'd tried to keep hidden. When Jungkook told the others, Taehyung punched the wall so hard his knuckles split open. Hoseok sat down and stared into space, unmoving. Yoongi didn't say anything, just walked out of the room and didn't return for hours. Jin stared at his phone, scrolling through old photos, as if trying to memorize a time before all this. Namjoon leaned against the wall, arms folded, but his eyes were watery. That evening, reporters began to gather outside the hospital. The news had leaked, an anonymous source confirming a BTS member was in critical condition. The internet exploded. Jungkook stepped into the hallway and was immediately flashed by cameras. What happened to Jimin? Is he in a coma? Can you confirm if it's life-threatening? Jungkook froze. Then slowly, he walked to the microphone stand that the hospital PR team had hastily set up. He took a breath. I'm not going to answer your questions, he said, voice steady but hollow. Because this isn't about public statements. This is about someone I love fighting for his life. And I'm done pretending everything's okay just to keep the world comfortable. And with that, he turned and walked back inside, slamming the doors behind him. In the days that followed, the hospital became a fortress. Security doubled. Fans lit candles outside the gates. The members rotated shifts, keeping vigil. The room filled with flowers, letters, prayers in a dozen languages. But Jimin didn't wake up. Jungkook sat by the window one evening, eyes dark and sleepless. Then he heard it. A cough. Soft, raspy, weak. He turned. Jimin's eyes were fluttering, his lips parted, he whispered something. Jungkook rushed to him, heart hammering. What is it? I'm here, Hyung, I'm right here. Jimin's lips barely moved. Did I ruin everything? He asked, voice fragile. Jungkook's heart cracked wide open. No, he said, tears already falling again. You didn't ruin anything. And as the machines continued to beat beside them, the weight of everything unspoken hung in the air. And they both knew the hardest part was still to come. You knew, and you still let me sing. The moment Jimin's eyes fluttered open again, hours later, there was no flood of relief, only a suffocating silence. His gaze, once soft with quiet mischief and warmth, was now hollow and rimmed with confusion. He scanned the room slowly, taking in the machines, the lights, the oxygen line under his nose, the heart monitor's rhythmic beep, and then, finally, Jungkook. His hand was still wrapped around Jimin's like a promise that refused to break. Why are you crying? Jimin's voice was raspy, but the accusation behind the words stung more than any scream could. Jungkook blinked, startled by the unexpected sharpness. You almost died, he said, voice catching. Jimin closed his eyes again as if that statement was an inconvenience, something he'd hoped no one would notice. I didn't ask you to be here. You didn't have to, Jungkook replied, refusing to let go of his hand. I was never going to leave you. The door opened quietly, but the air shifted like a storm had just walked in. Namjoon stood there, silent. Behind him, Taehyung entered without a word, his expression unreadable, like he had practiced it all night. Jimin turned his face away as the others stepped inside one by one, their steps soft, uncertain, heavy. Yoongi leaned against the wall, arms folded tightly. Jin looked like he hadn't slept in days. Hoseok, usually the light in any room, looked drained, his eyes red, his hands trembling ever so slightly. Jimin let out a bitter chuckle, so low it almost didn't register. Great, he muttered. You called the whole circus. Hyung, Taehyung said, his voice quiet but strained. Don't do that. Do what? Jimin snapped, struggling to sit up. Pretend this isn't humiliating. That I didn't just wake up in a bed I never wanted to be in, surrounded by people who pity me. No one's pitying you, Jungkook said, standing now. We're scared, that's not the same thing. Jimin's eyes locked onto him, anger beginning to cut through the fog of sedation. You told them everything, didn't you? Jungkook froze. I can see it on their faces, Jimin said, voice rising. You told them what I begged you not to. You broke the only promise I asked you to keep. You're alive because I broke it, Jungkook said through gritted teeth. I would break it 1,000 times again if it meant you breathing in front of me right now. You had no right, Jimin's voice cracked as the machines blipped in warning. The nurse on duty stepped in immediately, but Namjoon held a hand up to stop her. Jimin was panting now, chest rising and falling rapidly, his voice thick with a mix of anger, betrayal, and shame. You had no right to take that from me, my privacy, my dignity. You had no right to die and not tell us, Jungkook shouted back, slamming his fist against the side of the bed. You think I wanted to find you collapsed in the hallway. You think I wanted to sit there while your heart stopped for 38 seconds and I didn't know what was killing you. The room trembled in silence. Taehyung stepped forward. Jimin, you're not alone anymore. We can carry it together. Jimin shook his head, bitter tears falling. You don't understand. You still don't. You think this is about illness, about secrets. This is about not being allowed to fall apart. His words hit every person in the room like glass shattering. I've spent years being the glue, he continued, his voice broken now. Smiling when I didn't want to, dancing when my legs felt like fire, telling you all it's okay, because I thought that's what I had to do, Because if I broke, maybe we all would. And now I can't even hide it anymore. I can't even choose how to disappear. Then don't, Hoseok finally said, stepping forward. Don't disappear, let us help. Jimin looked at them, one by one, and finally back at Jungkook. You knew, he whispered. You knew, and you still let me sing. Jungkook's heart shattered in silence. The monitor beeped louder again. The nurse insisted they all leave the room. No one argued this time. Outside in the hallway, the air was thicker than anything they'd ever felt on stage or in a rehearsal room. Namjoon exhaled slowly. This is bigger than any of us. We need a professional team, Jin said. A real one, not the company's PR health squad. I've already made calls, Jungkook said, voice devoid of pride. International immunology specialists, psychological trauma units, we're flying in a team. Taehyung leaned against the wall, wiping his face with his sleeve. You think the company will let us go on hiatus because of this? Yoongi scoffed. Do you think I give a damn about the company right now? But the question lingered, because while Jimin fought to breathe, the machine around BTS kept spinning. Sponsors, agencies, managers, interviewers, cameras waiting to be turned on. And soon, someone would want answers. Jungkook turned, fire in his eyes. If they try to push us forward like this, I swear I'll walk. No, Namjoon said, looking at all of them. We all walk together. That decision would echo for days. Headlines would explode. BTS indefinitely suspends all activities due to a private medical crisis. Theories swarmed online. Leaked voice recordings from a staffer saying, Jungkook exploded on the label, fueled hashtags like Let BTS Rest and Protect Jimin. But the real storm wasn't outside. It was brewing inside the ICU. Inside every room they sat in afterward, inside every mirror they looked into when they asked themselves why none of them saw it coming. And when Jimin opened his eyes again the next day, the first thing he whispered was, Am I still worth it? And none of them could answer that question without choking on guilt. Jungkook hadn't slept, not truly, not in a way that let his bones rest or his mind slow down. The hospital couch was unforgiving, but his guilt was worse. He sat in the dark, only the soft glow of a vending machine nearby casting dull light across his silhouette. His phone buzzed again, another message from a HYBE executive asking for a briefing on the incident. That was what they were calling it. An incident, not a crisis, not a collapse. Not the near death of one of their most beloved members. Just a sterile, corporate footnote they wanted to sweep under an emergency protocol rug. He ignored the message. At 4:42 a.m., the elevator chimed and opened. Namjoon stepped out, hair disheveled, hoodie drawn tight, eyes dull from fatigue. I figured you'd be here, he said softly, sliding down beside Jungkook. Jungkook didn't speak. For a moment, neither did Namjoon. Then they want to schedule a statement, something controlled. They'll write it for us. They think this is just another comeback scandal, Jungkook muttered, barely audible, like it's manageable. They don't understand, Namjoon replied. They never did. To them, we're a product. To us, he's our brother. Silence. Namjoon rubbed his temples. There's more. An intern leaked the ICU admittance log to the press. That's how it got out. They know it was Jimin now. There's even a photo of you outside the ER. Jungkook didn't react. It was as if nothing could faze him anymore. But inside, something cracked open wider. I'm gonna burn that company to the ground if they try to silence him again. Namjoon sighed. That's not what he needs. He doesn't need revenge. He needs someone who doesn't leave when he's at his weakest. I never left. No, you didn't, Namjoon said gently, placing a hand on his shoulder. But you're about to make this bigger than him, and I don't know if he can survive that kind of spotlight again. Just then Jungkook's phone buzzed again, a message from Taehyung. You need to come upstairs, now. He was on his feet in an instant. Jimin was awake. Not groggy, not half-conscious, awake. Sitting up, IV still threaded into his veins, oxygen still feeding his lungs, but eyes clear, sharp. Taehyung sat beside him, quiet, his face unreadable. When Jungkook entered, Jimin's gaze locked onto him instantly. "We need to talk," Jimin said. The tone made Jungkook's stomach turn. "I told them to step out," Jimin added, "just you and me." Jungkook hesitated, then walked in, closing the door behind him. He took the chair opposite the bed. Jimin watched him for a long time, then finally asked, "Why did you tell them everything?" Jungkook exhaled. "Because you were dying, because I couldn't live with myself if I let that happen." Jimin looked away. "So you decided to save me, even if it meant shattering the last bit of control I had left. You were collapsing in front of us, Hyung. You think I had a choice. You always have a choice." There was venom in Jimin's voice, but it wasn't cruelty, it was pain, deep, raw, ancient. Jungkook leaned forward, eyes burning. "You think I didn't know what it meant to betray your trust. You think I didn't sit there every night replaying it in my head, wondering if I'd made it worse. I chose the pain of your hatred over the silence of your death." Jimin's lower lip trembled, but he didn't let the tears fall. "You know what the worst part is," he said finally. "I thought I was being strong. I thought hiding it meant I was sparing you all. But now I realize I was just afraid you'd stop loving me if you saw me weak." Jungkook's voice broke. "We never stopped loving you. We loved you more when you were real." Something in Jimin broke. His hand moved instinctively to cover his face, but the IV line stopped him. His body shook with a single sob before he pulled it back together. "I was having seizures at night," he whispered. "They weren't major, just small ones. I'd wake up on the floor sometimes. I never told anyone. I thought I could manage it. I thought if I rested between schedules, if I kept my diet strict, if I pushed just a little longer." "You didn't want to be the burden," Jungkook whispered. "I didn't want to be the reason the group stopped." There it was. The hidden root of it all. Not ego. Not denial. But fear, pure, suffocating fear. "You weren't the reason we would have stopped," Jungkook said. "You were the reason we kept going. But now I'm begging you, don't keep running away from us." Jimin turned toward the window. He didn't speak for a long time. "And then, do you know what the doctors told me?" Jungkook waited. "They said it wasn't just the illness. It was the stress, the years of compounded pressure, the perfectionism, the suppression. My immune system wasn't just failing, it was attacking itself." Jungkook swallowed hard. "You want to know the real scandal," Jimin said with a bitter laugh. "The real scandal is that I gave everything I had to this industry, and it almost killed me." Jungkook stood up slowly, walked over and knelt beside the bed. "Then let's stop giving it everything. Let's keep something for ourselves." Jimin looked at him, something softening. "You mean that?" "I'll walk away tomorrow," Jungkook said. "If that's what it takes, if that's what saves you." Outside the door, the others listened. And inside, Jimin finally let himself cry. Not the silent tears of fear or exhaustion, but the full-bodied sobs of someone who had been holding his breath for too many years. That night the members gathered in the room, pulled the chairs closer, and for the first time in a long time they spoke, not as idols, not as spokespeople, not as public figures, but as brothers. And when Yoongi confessed that he'd known something was off but was too afraid to confront it, when Hoseok admitted he'd seen the bruises on Jimin's arms and thought they were from dance practice, when Jin broke down saying he'd noticed Jimin's disappearing weight but believed his smile over his own eyes, it all came undone. Every layer of illusion, every mask, and under it all was a boy, barely 30, who just wanted to be seen for who he really was. Not the flawless performer, not the eternal sunshine, just Jimin. And in that hospital room under fluorescent lights and quiet machines, they made a vow, not one of comeback dates or chart-topping goals, but one that mattered more. They would never, ever lose one of their own to silence again, even if it meant walking away from everything they built, even if it meant burning the whole industry down to protect the ones they loved. And somewhere in the corner of that sterile, quiet room, something sacred healed. For the first time, not just in months, but in years. They exhaled. Together. This isn't recovery, it's retaliation. The door slammed so hard, the walls seemed to rattle with the weight of what had just been said. Namjoon stood in the hallway. Fists clenched so tight his knuckles were white, breath coming in uneven bursts. Taehyung followed behind, face unreadable, jaw tight. Hoseok was packing, silent, his usual warmth buried under layers of disbelief. Yoongi, for once, didn't have a plan. Jin sat slumped on the edge of the plastic hospital bench, blinking as if someone had just slapped him across the face. Jungkook came out last, walking like his entire body had aged 10 years in one night. He didn't say anything. His lips were pressed into a thin line, the corners trembling like a dam about to burst. "What did he say?" Jin asked quietly, afraid of the answer. Jungkook didn't meet anyone's eyes. "He said he doesn't know who he is anymore," Jungkook finally whispered. "And worse, he doesn't want to find out." Yoongi leaned his head against the wall, eyes closed. "God. He thinks if he starts healing, he'll be useless to us," Jungkook added. "That all his worth is in how much he performs, not who he is." Namjoon cursed under his breath, louder than anyone had ever heard him in public. "They did this," he hissed. "This system. This industry. They trained him to believe that perfection was love, that burnout was professionalism. We should have fought harder. We should have pulled him out sooner." "We did fight," Taehyung replied coldly, "but not loud enough." There was silence. Then Jungkook's phone rang. The screen lit up, CEO Bae Sungmin. He answered, putting it on speaker without a word. "Jungkook SSI," came the voice, too smooth to be sincere. "First, let me say how concerned we all are about Jimin. The entire company is on standby, ready to support you all however we can." Jungkook's face darkened. "Support?" "Of course," the CEO continued, oblivious to the venom forming in Jungkook's expression. "We've already drafted an official statement for release. Nothing too detailed. Just enough to assure the public that Jimin is resting and the group is focusing on health." "You mean damage control," Yoongi said flatly. "Excuse me," the CEO replied. "You don't care about his health," Taehyung added. "You care about optics." There was a pause on the other end. "Gentlemen, I understand this is emotional for you, but we need to think carefully. If you respond recklessly, you could harm BTS's legacy." "Don't you dare talk to me about legacy right now," Jungkook snapped. "Jimin nearly died. You knew he was sick, I'm sure of it. Don't play dumb." Another pause, longer. "What are you accusing us of?" "You tell me," Jungkook said. "You assigned handlers. You insisted on daily reports. You monitored every calorie, every schedule, every breath. You think we don't know you're aware of more than you admit." "That's enough," the CEO said, tone dropping like a threat. Jungkook's jaw clenched. "No, it's not." He hung up. Nobody spoke. Not until Hoseok finally broke the silence. "So now what?" Namjoon turned, eyes sharper than glass. "Now we start burning bridges." 3 hours later, they were in the private conference room of their temporary hotel suite, with legal counsel on standby and their personal security posted outside the door. Jungkook paced like a caged animal while Namjoon reviewed legal documents. Jin sat with a tablet in his lap, scrolling through media headlines that were beginning to spiral. "Jimin health crisis. Is BTS over?" read one. "Hidden illness. The truth behind the collapse," read another. Fans were panicking. The label had gone quiet. The narrative was slipping. "They want to release the documentary," Namjoon said suddenly. "The one they filmed secretly during the last tour." Jungkook stopped packing. "What documentary?" Apparently they had cameras running at all times, Yoongi replied. Some staffers were told it was a behind-the-scenes for archival purposes. But the footage, it shows Jimin breaking down, vomiting, shaking backstage, almost fainting during rehearsals. They filmed that. Taehyung's voice shook with rage. They want to reframe it, Jin added, paint it as a story of resilience, turn his suffering into a PR tool. Jungkook grabbed the nearest glass and threw it against the wall. It shattered. This isn't recovery, he said, breathing hard. It's retaliation. They're using his trauma to cover their tracks. Namjoon stood, then we stop them. How? Hoseok asked. If we go public, we blow everything up. Contracts, endorsements, even army might get caught in the crossfire. Then we aim carefully, Jungkook said. We leak it, but on our terms. You want us to expose HYBE? Jin asked, voice shaking. All of it. Jungkook nodded, if that's what it takes. Silence. Then one by one, they nodded. Taehyung looked around, but Jimin needs to agree. Back at the hospital, Jimin was sitting upright now, pale, weak, but alert. He looked at them as they entered the room, eyes narrowed. I heard, he said. Jungkook stepped forward. We won't do anything without you. Jimin looked at each of them. You want to destroy them. No, Namjoon said. We want to destroy the lie. Jimin's eyes filled with tears. You really think people will care about the truth? Jungkook walked up to him. They will if it comes from you. The room fell silent. Jimin inhaled slowly, then he nodded. Then let's start telling it. You were paid to stay silent, were you? Jimin's signature was barely dry on the legal waiver when the private server unlocked. The manila folder slid across the polished hotel table, and inside it were documents that didn't just bend the truth, they shattered it. Doctors' reports with dates they'd never seen. Blood work signed off by physicians they didn't know. A confidential directive labeled internal, artist welfare monitoring tier 4, Park Jimin. Jungkook's hand trembled as he flipped through the paperwork. He could barely breathe as he read the first line out loud. Subject demonstrates high physical output capacity despite indicators of autoimmune stress. Recommend silent medical intervention protocol. Taehyung looked up. What the hell is silent medical intervention? It means they knew, Yoongi whispered, face pale. It means HYBE was monitoring him, quietly, without disclosure, without consent. Namjoon stood frozen, jaw tight, heart pounding. This isn't just a mistake. This is institutional manipulation. They hid it. They treated him like a risk factor, not a person. Jimin didn't blink. His face was cold stone. So that's what I was, a liability. Hoseok put a hand to his mouth, stepping back like the truth physically burned. They signed off on this, multiple times. Managers, doctors, even the security team. Jungkook's voice was sharp and bitter. They knew about the symptoms. They watched him collapse backstage. They gave him vitamin IVs and told the staff it was fatigue support. Jin suddenly stood, his face twisted in disbelief. Wait, look at this line. Exposure to peers must remain minimal to avoid disruption of group morale. That's why they kept assigning different staff to him. That's why we couldn't talk to him alone during the tour. Namjoon's voice dropped. They isolated him. Jimin leaned back in his chair. They didn't want me to talk. The room exploded with noise. Everyone shouting. Hoseok packing in tight circles. Jin swearing. Yoongi's voice like a whip as he said what they were all afraid of. They didn't just watch him get sick. They let him. Jungkook turned to Jimin slowly. Do you want to go public with this? Jimin hesitated. I don't know. What do you mean you don't know? Taehyung's voice broke, fierce and raw. They almost killed you. They didn't kill me, Jimin snapped. And you don't know what happens when you become the face of a scandal, when your pain becomes a brand. Then let us protect you, Jungkook said, eyes burning. Let us take it on. Jimin's voice was hollow. I don't want to be a martyr, I just wanted to be free. Suddenly the hotel door beeped. A keycard. Jungkook stepped forward instinctively, motioning everyone to quiet. The door opened, and in walked manager Seo, the longest-standing member of their internal team. His face was blank, eyes carefully avoiding Jimin's. "What the hell are you doing here?" Yoongi snapped. Seo lifted his hands. "I came to explain." "No one asked you to," Namjoon said flatly. Jungkook stared at him, eyes narrowing. "You were on every tour Jimin fainted on. You were the one who told us he was fine. You made us believe it was just exhaustion." Seo swallowed hard. "I did what I was told." Taehyung's voice rose. "By who?" Seo hesitated. "HYBE's medical compliance team. Executive orders. If we escalated symptoms beyond Tier 2, it would trigger a contract review." Jin stepped forward. "You mean if they acknowledged Jimin was sick, they'd have to give him time off, pay penalties, compensate? That's why they classified it as fatigue." Seo didn't answer. Yoongi's voice shook with fury. "You were paid to stay silent, weren't you?" Seo looked away. Jungkook stepped closer, fists clenched. "I trusted you, he trusted you, and you stood there and let him fall apart while you held the clipboard." "I was trying to protect the group," Seo said weakly. "No," Jimin whispered from behind them. "You were trying to protect the image." The silence was deafening. Seo finally looked at him, regret surfacing behind his composed exterior. "I'm sorry." Jimin met his eyes. "Then prove it." Seo blinked. "What?" "Leak it yourself," Jimin said. "The documents, the tapes, the protocols, send it anonymously, prove you're sorry." Seo hesitated. "They'll trace it back to me." "Then wear it," Jimin said, voice clear, "because I've worn this long enough." Seo didn't speak. He left the room in silence. That night they stayed up watching the leak go live. It hit at 2:17 a.m. through a whistleblower platform with encrypted access. The entire file dropped: documents, emails, audio clips, internal memos. Within minutes, fans found it. The hashtags began to shift. The tone of the conversation changed, from worry to rage, from confusion to fury. And Jimin watched it all in silence. "Do you regret it?" Jungkook asked quietly, sitting beside him as the sky turned purple with dawn. "No," Jimin said. "I just don't know who I am when I'm not surviving." "You'll figure it out," Jungkook said, placing a hand over his. "And this time will help you." Jimin looked at him. "Even if I leave?" Jungkook flinched. "Leave?" Jimin turned to the window. "I've been thinking, maybe this is my out. Maybe I let this be the end." Jungkook's throat closed. "Don't say that." "I'm tired," Jimin whispered. "I don't want to perform pain anymore." "You're not a burden," Jungkook said. "Don't confuse being exhausted with being replaceable." "I'm not trying to be dramatic," Jimin added. "I'm trying to be honest." "Then be honest," Jungkook said. "But don't make that decision today. Don't decide your worth when you're still bleeding." Jimin didn't answer. But something in his eyes shifted. And somewhere in the quiet, the first thread of healing took root, not with cameras or comebacks, not with applause or charts, but with truth. And the painful, terrifying freedom that came with it. "Let the world hear me before they silence me again." The air inside the hospital room felt heavier than the headlines crashing outside its windows. The leak detonated like a bomb. Hashtags trending in 74 countries. International news coverage spun out like wildfire. Global K-pop star silenced by his own label. Industry insider documents reveal medical neglect. HYBE accused of withholding treatment for profit. Jimin sat up against the pillow, an oxygen tube still nestled beneath his nose. He stared at the television in silence as news anchors debated his life like it was a storyline. Jungkook stood beside him, watching the crawl of words on the bottom of the screen. "We stand with Jimin. BTS deserves justice." None of it felt real. Namjoon entered the room holding a sealed envelope. "We got a response." Everyone in the room turned. Jimin lifted his eyes slowly. From HYBE. Namjoon nodded. They've summoned us to a closed-door arbitration meeting. No press. No lawyers. They said it's an internal crisis strategy consultation. More like a cover party, Yoongi muttered. Jin crossed his arms. Let me guess, they want to offer a settlement, NDA included. They're panicking, Hoseok added. It's written all over the headlines. Investors are bailing. Sponsorships are suspending campaigns. Stock dropped 11% this morning. Jungkook looked at Jimin. What do you want to do? Jimin's voice was steady. I want to see their faces when I tell them they don't own me anymore. That afternoon, the 7 of them entered the building not as idols, but as a united front. The private conference room on the top floor of HYBE's headquarters had never felt more foreign. The glass table, the minimalist aesthetic, the perfectly staged potted plants, it all reeked of sanitized guilt. CEO Bae Sung-min sat at the head of the table, flanked by legal advisors, PR executives, and medical consultants in suits who refused to make eye contact. Gentlemen, the CEO began, standing with rehearsed empathy. We're so sorry for the emotional distress this situation has caused. Stop, Jimin said. It was the first time he had spoken publicly since the collapse. Everyone froze. I'm not here for apologies, he said. I'm here for the truth. You had access to my medical files. You signed off on treatments behind my back. You paid off staff to say I was fine. Do not insult me by pretending you didn't know. The CEO shifted. There were compliance gaps, certainly, but no malicious intent. You exploited my body for profit, Jimin said, his voice rising. You watched me deteriorate and called it fatigue management. You told your staff to withhold information from me. That is not negligence. That is abuse. Jimin SSI, one executive interjected. Perhaps we can find a middle ground. We are prepared to offer a wellness fund, indefinite leave, and personal medical care. On what condition, Yoongi snapped, that he shuts up. The room went quiet again. Let's not turn this into a war, the CEO said. We all want what's best for BTS. Jungkook slammed his hand down on the table, then stopped trying to control the narrative. We're offering a new direction, the CEO said smoothly. A revised comeback strategy where Jimin can gradually reintroduce himself to the public. I'm not a damaged product you need to repackage, Jimin said, eyes sharp. You don't get to dictate how I heal. Namjoon leaned forward. Let's cut to the chase. You want this buried, you want him silent. What's the offer? The lead legal counsel cleared his throat. Full severance, medical compensation, a permanent NDA. In return, Jimin agrees not to publicly disclose further details. The group continues with adjusted branding. No, Jimin said instantly. You should think, the PR director began. I said no. The CEO exhaled through his nose. Then you leave us no choice. Jin stood. What is that, a threat? HYBE's legal head placed a new folder on the table. If this escalates, we'll be forced to disclose security footage, internal texts. Try me, Jimin said, voice steel. Release the footage. Let the world see me vomiting in stairwells while your staff walks past me. Let them hear the audio of your assistant telling me to push through or get replaced. You want to drag this through the mud. Let's see who drowns first. There was silence. No one moved. Jimin stood slowly, wincing slightly as the movement strained his ribs, but his voice was unwavering. I have something to say, and I'll say it live. You don't get to stop me. He walked out. That night, Jimin announced an impromptu live stream. No notice, no schedule, just one post. Let the world hear me before they silence me again. Within minutes, millions joined. He appeared on screen in a hoodie, sitting in a plain room. No lighting crew, no makeup, no filters. His voice was calm. I wasn't going to say anything, he began, But if I don't speak now, I'll never forgive myself. He looked directly at the camera. For years, I gave everything I had to my art. I believed that as long as I smiled, danced, and sang, I would be okay, but I was. And the people who were supposed to protect me knew that. They said they loved me while feeding me pills. They called me strong while watching me shake. They labeled my illness a risk. He paused. I was told I'd ruin the group if I told the truth, that people would pity me, that I'd be hated. But you know what ruins a group? Silence. And I won't be silent anymore. Tears streamed down his face. I don't know what happens next. I don't know if I'll return. But I do know that I deserve to live. Not perform, not pretend, just live. And I hope anyone else out there who's been told to smile through their pain hears me. The stream ended after 11 minutes. And in that short time, everything changed. Articles exploded, support poured in, celebrities voiced outrage, fans wept, government figures demanded an investigation. HYBE issued a vague denial, but it was too late. Jimin had taken back the narrative, and in doing so, changed the rules of the game. Forever. He's gone, Jungkook, and he didn't leave a note. The door to the hospital room was wide open. The bed was empty. The machines were powered off, the IV stand wheeled into the corner, unplugged. A single hospital bracelet lay on the window ledge, the sunlight bleeding across the faded letters of Jimin's name. There was no nurse in sight, no discharge papers on file, no medical escort, only silence and absence. Taehyung was the first to speak. Tell me this is a mistake. Jungkook's eyes were already wide, his breath caught somewhere in his throat, fingers twitching like he wanted to punch through the drywall. He walked into the room, slowly at first, like stepping into a dream that was slowly melting into nightmare. The sheets were still warm. He had been there not long ago. A nurse appeared at the doorway. "You're looking for Park Jimin?" she asked. Jin nodded sharply. "Where is he?" The nurse frowned. I thought he was transferred to a private clinic. The order came in from central admin." "What clinic?" Yoongi demanded. She hesitated. "I'm not sure. It didn't go through the nurse's station." "Find out," Jungkook said. But something in his voice was so broken, so unhinged, the nurse didn't respond. She just nodded and backed out of the room. Hoseok walked over to the hospital bracelet, picking it up like it was a relic from another world. He left this. Namjoon was already on the phone. "I'm calling security. No one moves until we know who signed those orders." Jungkook was silent. Utterly silent. He stood there staring at the bed like he could will Jimin's shape back into the mattress. He didn't blink, didn't speak. Then he whispered. He didn't say goodbye. Hours passed, security footage pulled, blank spots in the hallway recordings, a blackout between 2:37 and 2:46 a.m., tampered. A man in a medical coat escorted Jimin in a wheelchair, face obscured, no identification, no security badge used at the exit door. It was a ghost extraction. And someone on the inside helped make it happen. "They took him," Yoongi said, reading the footage over and over. "But why?" Hoseok asked. "After everything we just exposed, why would they risk pulling something like this now?" "Because he made them bleed," Namjoon muttered, "and this is them bleeding back." Jungkook finally spoke. He didn't leave a note. They all turned to him. "I've known him since I was 15, Jungkook said, voice trembling. "And no matter how bad things got, even when he wanted to disappear, he always left something behind. A message, a drawing, a note in my shoe, a voicemail he never sent, something, anything." Taehyung's voice cracked. "So if he didn't leave one now, it means he wasn't planning to leave." It hit them like a wave. He hadn't walked out. He had been taken. The next day, HYBE released a statement. Jimin has voluntarily stepped away from public life to focus on personal recovery in a private facility. BTS remains united in supporting his healing journey. We ask for fans to respect his privacy. No facility was named. No doctor listed. No address. Nothing. The fandom exploded in fury. Whereas Jimin trended within 30 minutes, the statement was torn apart line by line. Fans who remembered the livestream knew something was off. This didn't match his tone, his strength, his determination. He wouldn't run. And he sure as hell wouldn't stay silent now. At the hotel, the rest of the members stared at the screen in horror. "That's a hostage note," Jin said. "They're rewriting the story again," Taehyung muttered. "They're trying to erase him in real time," Jungkook whispered. Namjoon stood slowly. "Then we go after him." Yoongi shook his head. "It's not that simple." Namjoon turned, eyes sharp. "You're not going to tell me we have to sit here while they hide one of our own." "I'm saying it's bigger than you think," Yoongi said. "They're scared, cornered. And when corporations like this get scared, they don't just fight dirty, they destroy lives." "So what?" Jungkook said, stepping forward. "We do nothing." Yoongi's voice dropped. "I'm saying if we charge forward without a plan, we might never see him again." Silence. Then a phone rang. "Jungkook." "Unknown number." He answered. The voice on the other end was small, shaky, familiar. "Jungkook." His knees nearly buckled. "Jimin, where are you? What the hell happened?" But Jimin was already crying. "I can't talk long, they found me." "Where are you?" "I don't know, it's a private house. White walls, cameras in every room. They took my phone and replaced it. I found this one hidden in a closet. I think it belongs to someone else, maybe another artist they kept here." "Are you hurt?" A pause. "Not yet." Jungkook's throat burned. "They keep saying I agreed to this, that I signed something. I didn't. I never saw a document. I blacked out. When I woke up, I was here." "We're coming for you." "No," Jimin whispered. "Don't, not yet. You can't be seen. They'll cut me off for real." "Then what do you want me to do?" "I left something," Jimin said. "A box, hidden in your studio. Behind the wall panel, you'll know it when you see it. Everything you need is in there." And then the line went dead. Jungkook stood in the middle of the room, breath short, eyes wide. "He called me," he said. "He's not safe, but he's alive." "What did he say?" Namjoon asked. "He said he left something in the studio." They didn't wait. At 2 a.m., under cover of darkness, the 7 of them slipped into Jungkook's private recording space, sealed off from the label, built during the pandemic in a building under his name. It took him 5 minutes to find the panel. Behind it, a black wooden box. Inside, documents, photos, recordings, and a flash drive labeled, "In case they try to erase me." Yoongi plugged it in. A video loaded. Jimin appeared on screen, sitting in the same room they saw in the surveillance footage. Same hoodie, same pale face, but his eyes were fierce. "If you're watching this," he said, "then they took me before I could finish the fight." He leaned forward. "Don't let them win, expose it all, use my name, burn every lie down to the bones. I'm not afraid anymore." The screen went black. And the war began. "You lied to all of us." The video file finished playing. The room was so silent it could have collapsed under the weight of its own dread. Yoongi slowly turned off the screen. No one moved. No one even blinked. Jimin's voice still rang in their ears. "Don't let them win. Burn every lie down to the bones." Jungkook stood frozen in the center of the studio, his fists clenched so tightly his knuckles looked bloodless. His eyes were locked on the dark monitor, as if the moment it turned off, Jimin would vanish again, just like he had in the hospital, just like he had when they weren't looking, just like he always did when he was hurt. Namjoon cleared his throat. We release it all. Taehyung snapped his head up. Wait. Everyone turned toward him. Taehyung looked off, paler than usual, like something was gnawing at the edge of his tongue. There's something we need to talk about first. Jin furrowed his brow. What is it? Taehyung hesitated. Then he looked directly at Jungkook. There's something you don't know. Jungkook stiffened. About Jimin. No, about the leak. Yoongi narrowed his eyes. What are you saying? Taehyung took a breath like it might be his last. HYBE didn't trace the whistleblower leak to a hacker or an intern. They traced it to an internal account, one of ours. Jungkook's voice was low, dangerous. What are you saying, T? Taehyung looked down. It was me. Silence snapped like a bone, breaking in the middle of the room. I uploaded the first wave of documents, Taehyung said, finally looking up. Not because I didn't trust you all, but because I didn't want to wait for consensus while Jimin was dying. I was scared they were going to bury him, erase him before we even moved. So I pulled the files from the encrypted server I found in the hotel, and I dropped them anonymously. You knew, Jin whispered. Taehyung nodded. You knew about the server, the access, the footage, and you didn't tell us, Hoseok asked. I didn't have time. I thought I could contain it, but once it spread, it went global overnight. Namjoon stepped back, stunned. You could have warned us. I thought I was protecting him, Taehyung snapped, and maybe I was protecting myself too. You lied to all of us, Jungkook said, his voice barely more than a whisper. I didn't lie, Taehyung said. I acted. You didn't trust me to act, Jungkook replied. You thought I'd hesitate. Taehyung didn't respond. Jungkook took a step forward. And now Jimin's gone, and HYBE has a narrative that we can't control because we didn't do this together. He left because they took him, Taehyung shouted back, not because of me. You made them panic faster, Jungkook hissed. And when they panic, they erase everything. Yoongi finally stepped between them. Enough, we don't have time for blame, what's done is done. The real question is, what do we do now? Namjoon sat down heavily, rubbing his face with both hands. We follow the trail, we find where they're keeping him, and we finish what Jimin started. The flash drive contained more than just the confession video. There were server logs, coded employee rosters, and one name that stood out like a bruise. Director Han Doyeon, Division Artist Wellness Compliance. Jin pulled the personnel file from the drive. He's not just a doctor, he's a fixer, former military. He was brought in for high-risk artist evaluations. He's the one who issued the silent treatment orders on Jimin. Hoseok leaned over. Where is he now? According to this, Yoongi said, scrolling, he manages HYBE's remote wellness estates, discrete locations for rest and rehabilitation. More like lockdowns, Namjoon muttered. There's a property in Jeju, Jin said, private land, surveillance infrastructure, multiple exit points, no public record of patient admissions. Jungkook's face darkened. He's there. Namjoon's voice was cautious. If we go as civilians. No cameras, no statements, just us. Taehyung stepped forward. I'm coming. Jungkook didn't look at him. Of course you are. They flew overnight under aliases in a chartered private plane. Jeju air was thick with fog when they landed. They didn't speak much. Only the whirring of the engine and the silent hum of restrained chaos filled the space. It was Jin who finally broke the silence. What are you going to do if we find him, and he says he wants to stay? Jungkook stared out the window. Then I'll bring him home anyway. The estate was surrounded by trees. No obvious security but cameras embedded into the tree line. The main house was minimalist, sleek, and hollow, like everything HYBE built. But Jungkook didn't hesitate. He walked to the front door and pounded his fist against the wood. Nothing. Then the door opened. Han Doyeon stood there, tall, thin, with eyes that looked like they'd seen too much and felt too little. You shouldn't be here. Where is he? Jungkook demanded. Han didn't move. This isn't a public facility. I'm not the public. You have no legal right. Jungkook pushed past him. The others followed. Jimin was on the second floor. He sat in a white room with no windows, reading from a worn notebook. He didn't look up as the door burst open. He didn't flinch as 6 of them stormed in behind Jungkook. But when he saw them, something in his eyes cracked. You came. Jungkook crossed the room and dropped to his knees beside the bed. Of course I came. Jimin looked tired, more than tired. They said if I stayed quiet, they'd protect you, that if I said one more word, they'd come after all of you. Jin sat down at the edge of the bed. You think we care about threats? Taehyung stepped forward. You think we wouldn't burn this place down for you? Jimin swallowed. I didn't want to be the reason we ended. You were never the reason, Jungkook whispered. You're the only reason we survived. Tears spilled. And then for the first time in weeks, Jimin collapsed, not from sickness, not from exhaustion, but into their arms. Into safety. Into family. Into truth. Then let them try to destroy me, but this time I'll watch. The black SUVs were already waiting outside the Jeju estate when they stepped out. The clouds hung low, heavy and gray, a perfect mirror of the chaos about to descend. Jungkook moved instinctively to shield Jimin as the car doors opened, not knowing whether it would be a camera, a contract, or a bullet. It was none of those. It was a man in a navy suit holding a thick folder and a trembling jaw. You violated your artist protection contract, he said flatly, refusing to meet Jimin's eyes. You've breached confidentiality, publicly defamed the agency, and compromised confidential assets. Effective immediately, HYBE is terminating all agreements with Park Jimin. Yoongi stepped forward before Jungkook could react, and the rest of us. The man didn't blink. Pending. Pending what? Namjoon's voice was low but lethal. Pending whether you want to go down with him. Jimin stepped out from behind Jungkook. He didn't look scared. He looked free. Then do it, he said. Terminate me, disown me. Burn every photo you have of me. Remove me from every performance. Erase my name from the archives. But know this, your hands are already bloody, and now the world sees it. The man didn't respond. He simply extended the folder toward Jimin. Jungkook snatched it out of his hand and tore it in half. We don't accept. The ride back to Seoul was silent, except for the sound of Jimin's pen scratching across paper. He was writing furiously in the back of the van, page after page, as if racing against something only he could see. No one interrupted. They watched him, protected him, let him bleed ink instead of guilt. By the time they reached the hotel, he had filled a notebook cover to cover. Taehyung helped him upstairs, one arm around his shoulders. You don't have to keep proving yourself to us, he whispered. I'm not, Jimin replied. I'm remembering who I was before they told me who to be. Namjoon received the alert first. HYBE had launched a full media strike. A press conference, framed with sterile sincerity, broadcast across every major network in South Korea and streamed globally. We deeply regret the false narratives circulating about our organization. We have always prioritized the health and wellness of our artists. Park Jimin's current allegations are not only unfounded, but deeply damaging to the trust we've worked hard to build with fans worldwide. The CEO stood behind a podium, flanked by legal and PR advisors. No medical experts, no remorse. What's worse, he continued, is that the remaining members of BTS have allowed personal emotions to eclipse professionalism, placing the entire brand at risk. This situation will be addressed through internal restructuring and reevaluation of all ongoing contracts. Jungkook was standing. His hands were shaking. Jin turned off the screen. "That's it," Jungkook said. "I'm done playing nice." Namjoon sat down slowly, shoulders tight. "He's baiting us, hoping we go off script so he can claim we're unstable." "Then maybe it's time we stop playing by their script altogether," Jimin said from the doorway. Everyone turned to him. He looked exhausted, still pale, still thin, but in his eyes there was something harder, something unbreakable. "I want to do one more interview," he said. "Live, no PR team, no questions in advance, no choreography, just me, them, and the truth." "Are you sure?" Jin asked gently. Jimin nodded. "This time I'm not running." The network agreed in less than an hour. The ratings were too good to pass up. A primetime slot, a solo seat, 1 hour, live broadcast, no delay. The nation watched in silence as Jimin stepped onto the set in a plain black shirt, no makeup, no stylist, no script, just him, and a bottle of water that he never touched. The host smiled politely. "Jimin SSI, many people were shocked by your live stream and your disappearance. Can you tell us, were you coerced into leaking internal documents?" "No," Jimin said. "I didn't leak them, but I did give permission, and I'm glad I did." "You understand that what you're accusing your label of is very serious." "What I experienced was very serious." The host hesitated. "They claim you were unstable, that your memories may be unreliable due to medication, exhaustion, trauma." Jimin didn't blink. "Is that what we call medical abuse now, trauma? Some say this is career suicide, that you're damaging BTS's future." Jimin leaned forward. "Let me say this clearly. I would rather lose everything than protect the people who watch me drown." The silence that followed was deafening. "You've said before that BTS is your family. Do you think they still support you?" Jimin didn't even look toward the camera. "They're the reason I'm still alive." That night, the ratings broke every record in the network's history. HYBE issued a second statement, a denial again, but it was weak, repetitive, desperate. And 2 days later, one by one, the remaining members of BTS filed formal letters demanding full contract audits and access to withheld medical records. All except one. The file didn't come from BTS's legal rep. It came from an anonymous source. And when the legal team opened it, they found a signed document from years ago, one with an embedded audio file. It was Jimin's signature. It was also proof that his medical consent had been forged. The voice on the tape. "Manager Seo." Yoongi called him. "Tell me it's fake," Yoongi said. "I did what I had to do," Seo replied. "They told me if I didn't sign it for him, he'd be dropped from the tour, that he'd lose everything. I didn't think it would go this far. I didn't know he was." "You knew," Yoongi said coldly, "and now we know too." They released the tape that night. The internet caught fire. The government announced a formal investigation. And for the first time, HYBE's top executives were issued subpoenas. The house was falling. And Jimin stood in front of the mirror, his fingers tracing the scar on his side, the one no fan had ever seen, the one hidden beneath costumes and compression tape. He looked up at Jungkook, who stood behind him in the mirror's reflection. "Do you think I'll ever sing again?" Jimin asked. Jungkook stepped forward, wrapped his arms around him, and pressed his forehead to the back of Jimin's neck. "When you're ready," he said, "only then." Jimin closed his eyes. And for once, the silence didn't feel like a threat. It felt like peace. If this is the end, let it be ours, not theirs. The courtroom smelled like old air and new lies. The wood panels were too polished. The fluorescent lights buzzed too bright. The suits too clean. It didn't feel like justice. It felt like performance. And for once, BTS weren't the stars of the show. They were witnesses, accusers, survivors. And the price of truth was written across their faces. Jimin sat at the center table, hands folded in his lap. His posture was rigid, but his voice was steady. When the prosecution asked if he had ever signed the medical waiver authorizing covert treatment, he looked them dead in the eye and said no. When asked how he discovered the forgery, he answered without hesitation. When asked how long he had been aware that his symptoms were being suppressed and his access to information blocked, his hands trembled but his words did not. "Years," he said, "but I was too scared to believe it." Jungkook sat behind him, fists clenched, body leaning forward like he wanted to throw himself into every question and take the weight off Jimin's shoulders. He had never looked at anyone the way he looked at him that day. Not in a concert, not in a photo shoot, not even in the darkest green room when they were young and terrified of failure. That courtroom gaze was worship, raw and terrified. HYBE's legal team tried everything. "Mr. Park has a history of depressive episodes. Are you sure your recollection is reliable?" "My trauma does not make me a liar," Jimin said, and half the world heard it. The label's responsibility is to its global brand. They had to protect the integrity of BTS. Then why didn't they protect the people inside it? The judge's gavel came down harder than anyone expected. Enough. The statement was read. The ruling was not final, but the motion for full investigation was granted. That was all BTS needed. They didn't speak in the car ride home. Jimin kept his eyes closed. Taehyung's hand rested gently over his knee. Hoseok leaned his head back and watched the clouds pass behind the tinted windows. Jin stared at his phone screen, watching the live feed comments pour in by the thousands. Yoongi had his headphones in, but the music wasn't playing. Namjoon sat forward, hands laced, praying without words. And Jungkook. Jungkook never took his eyes off Jimin, not once. They arrived back at the apartment and found two things waiting: a letter from the Minister of Culture requesting a private meeting, and a handwritten note taped to their front door. 7 names, no explanation, no signature. Just the words. "You choose what's next, but choose it together." Jin peeled it off slowly. "They're watching us." "Let them," Jimin whispered. Later that night, after showers and silences and microwaved leftovers that no one ate, they sat in the living room. No stylists, no management, no lights. Just them. Just the 7 who started everything. Namjoon spoke first. "They want to offer us a restructured contract, independent projects, more control, complete break from HYBE's management, but still under their umbrella, a way to clean it all up without burning it down." Yoongi scoffed. "So they get to keep the money but not the mess." "They're scared," Jin added. "This isn't mercy, it's insurance." Taehyung looked at Jimin. "And what do you want?" Jimin paused. "I want peace," he said, "but not if it means pretending again." Hoseok leaned forward. "Then we don't pretend, not anymore." "They'll still spin it," Jungkook said. "Whatever we do, they'll find a way to control the story." "Then we tell it first," Namjoon said. "Together, unfiltered, documentary, our own cameras, our own words, from the first rehearsal to the last betrayal." "Even the ugly parts?" Taehyung asked. "Especially the ugly parts," Jimin replied. They voted at midnight. Unanimous. The documentary would be called The Silence Between Songs, and it would begin with Jimin's collapse. No glamour, no edits, just truth. Filming began 2 weeks later. Every moment hurt, revisiting old footage, seeing themselves smiling through bruises, watching Jimin fade in the background of interviews, hearing the lies they all told themselves. But it was healing too. Reclaiming the truth. Numbing the pain. Jungkook's voice cracked during his first interview. "I thought if I loved him loud enough he wouldn't disappear, but love doesn't fix silence, only truth does." Yoongi said nothing in his. He just stared at the camera for 3 minutes straight before whispering, "I should have kicked the door down sooner." Taehyung admitted he knew more than he said. Jin cried on camera for the first time. Namjoon didn't wear a mic at all. He just submitted a letter, 14 pages long. And Jimin sang. Not for an album. Not for a tour. Just once. In the empty studio, lights low, only the camera rolling. His voice cracked 3 times. But he didn't stop. And when it was over, he looked directly into the lens and said, "I'm still here." When the documentary dropped, it broke every streaming record within 24 hours. HYBE issued no response. Because there was nothing left to say. And BTS. They held a press conference. No agents. No lawyers. Just 7 chairs. Jungkook was the last to speak. "If this is the end," he said, "then let it be ours, not theirs." Jimin reached over, took his hand and said quietly, so quiet it almost wasn't heard, "It's not the end." And for the first time in a long, long time, they believed him.